Arc 6, The Corridor of Memories. Chapter 1, The Dragon Carriage's Way Back. Natsuki Subaru's group continued to head directly towards east upon leaving the city of Pristella. They headed towards the eastern end of the world, an area that contained the Augria Sand Dunes, which was a plot of land with a rich history of demon beasts that have continued to exist for hundreds of years, rejecting every existence from stepping foot onto their territory. It contained a miasma that would cause travelers to lose their sense of direction and gnawed at their hearts. It contained groups of demon beasts as evil vanguards, who would indulge themselves in playing with people's lives. And then there was the person who sought for world peace, the person at the watchtower who determined each and every one of the successes and failures made by those who came close. This person was the sage, Shala. Subaru, just from knowing that, it feels like we're lining up for suicide. Just being reminded of the obstacles that lie ahead was enough to cause dejection. In reality, the beings that headed towards this place while knowing what lies ahead were perhaps beings like suicidal people, or perhaps witch worshippers. At any rate, it seemed like they were nothing but beings who had brain abnormalities. However, these people were neither of the above, as they had no intention to die. It was rather the opposite, they intended to live. They would provide a path of life in response to each and every one of the people who lost their lives on another path. They began this expedition in order to obtain this seed of hope. Subaru, nevertheless, it is mysterious. Subaru, who was isolated by the members who were sitting up front, whispered these words while continuing to imagine the jolting of the dragon carriage that didn't actually shake. When the people in the guest room heard his whisper, every single member had their eyes turned towards Subaru. A total of 4 glances came his way, adding in Subaru to the people who were in this carriage would make a total of 5 passengers. This was what the situation looked like. Emilia, mysterious? Did something happen? Subaru, no, it's nothing important, Emilia-tan. It's just, well, when one of our dragons that we amiably ride with made a face, I just thought to myself, she has a pretty startling part of her. Subaru responded this way as he brushed off Emilia's question. Emilia and Beatrice were located to Subaru's right and his left as they secured both sides. These were his allies. It was a given that these two would be with Subaru, but still, the question at hand would be the 2 people up front. Julius, well, it may very well have been normal for you to feel like such. Actually, I too thought it was really startling. It would be natural for Natsuki-kun to feel uncomfortable, huh? Anastasia, that's right. The person who let out high-pitched laughter and said this with her Kansai dialect, a dialect that was fixed to Kararaji dialect, was Anastasia. After the powerless sadist responded in a Kansai dialect, she looked towards him with a meaningful look while feeling her hair. Anastasia, although you might not be as bad as Julius, if we're only talking about things like comforting ridicule. Julius, that's harsh. However, please do not worry. I am also a knight at heart. Just a single night is enough for me to adjust my heart. Not to mention, the last few days have already been. I promise to never to show a sight that was similar to yesterday's shamefulness ever again. Anastasia, how elegant. We shall be expecting as such then, perhaps. Julius bowed and replied in response to Anastasia's banter-like way of speaking, because of the incident from before. It was something that would be obvious if you claimed it to be so. He received damage from Gluttony's authority, but it more specifically had effects on all of his friends, rather than effects on himself. It affected anybody but himself. Thus, the people that changed their behavior were his friends, rather than himself. He did not conceal his disturbance when he received these reactions, and on top of that, relating to what he had just said before, it seemed like his friends no longer accepted this with ease. Subaru. You're astounding. He let out this praise with his voice that wouldn't acknowledge the significance of things. The weak part about him was not being able to clearly express great praise. It wasn't as if Subaru could forget that feeling as well, the feeling of having your own existence being left behind, having nobody around to share the memories of your own. Natsuki Subaru definitely had recollections of this different world that nobody remembered, as he was one who could go back in time with his ability returned by death. If he were to recall a single experience where he built up connections only to have them lost, deep down, it would perhaps be the Roswell Mansion's initial, the repeated days at the Roswell Mansion. He got summoned into a different world, ran around doing all kinds of things at the king's capital to help Emilia, and then as a result, he was invited to Roswell's mansion. He then experienced 4 iterations of events before stepping foot into the 5th world. The memories up until the 4th world were held within Subaru and nowhere else. Even now, it was difficult to forget the shock he felt from being treated as a stranger by the people who he built relations with in those days at the mansion. That pain and sadness would never fade away. Beatrice, what is it? Subaru, why have you suddenly started petting Betty's head? Subaru, don't worry about it. They're just my deep emotions that say, I seriously got saved that time thanks to you. Thank you. Thank you. Beatrice, I don't understand, I suppose. Also, my hair is getting messed up so sto. You don't have to stop, but pet it just a little softer. Beatrice gave her head to Subaru as she occupied her half of the seat with her butt. Subaru petted her head just like how she asked for, not allowing her to forget his mind's condition when he was truly saved. The only person who didn't change their feelings towards Subaru during the loop of days at the mansion was Beatrice. They met before the beginning of the return by death. She remained to be the only person to not change how she'd come in contact with Subaru after that as well. Moreover, she too would keep the fact that she saved him as an eternal secret. Subaru, after that, Amelia-tan saved me, huh? Amelia? Amelia made a curious face in response to Subaru's reminiscence. Subaru was right here at this moment, because he was saved by her kindness, voice, attitude, and the warmth of her lap that she gave. This is how Subaru was able to recognize Julius' impressiveness of accomplishing things by himself as an actuality. Subaru could do this because of how he gained his triumphs. He got as much help as he could, as time elapsed while he tried to get things right 4 times. Or maybe it was because a certain someone would be there to lend him his help. A certain someone that was forgotten by Anastasia, a certain someone that didn't seek for help from anyone in his own camp, a certain someone who had his ties severed with the spirits whom he contracted with, a certain someone whose blood-related brother didn't remember him either. If that was the case, then he'd be grateful for him. Amelia, continuing to stare at people's faces like that. Is something wrong, Subaru? Subaru, it's nothing. I just thought of letting you know that you're beautiful, and I love the you who smiles with a sense of elegance. Julius, beautifully elegant, that indeed has a splendid sound to it. I never expected to receive praise from you. I'm surprisingly happy, or well, that may be an exaggeration. Well, isn't my beautiful elegance a given? Subaru, I didn't mean to praise you. Though, you do piss me off when you say it like that. With his same manner from the past, or rather, with his reaction that made it seem as if he became even more skilled with the slipping of the tongue, Subaru became the one to be annoyed. It was hard to take in the evident frailness that was on his face when he was at his brother's hospital room at Pristella. He was spirited in the past, and Subaru had recollections of the times when a lack of satisfaction was evident in his expression. However, all of that is completely forgotten history now. Amelia, you and Julius get along well. Like how you guys are right now, and just like how you guys were in your talk. Subaru, Amelia-tan, you got it wrong. There's no way me and this guy get along well. Did you see my face? My eyes had the scariest look ever. Although, that is just my viewpoint. Amelia, really? I don't think you're right, but, I'm not talking about the look you had in your eyes. I'm talking about when you said that you two don't get along well. Subaru's eyes had the same level of extreme scariness as always. Subaru, the same level of extreme scariness as always. Amelia, well for me, I love Subaru's eyes. I'm being truthfully truthful. Subaru, damn it. How I wish that part about my eyes was left out from the audio recording. Amelia let out a wry smile as she filled Subaru with regret. She then turned towards Julius with an inquisitive look, causing him to take a glance towards Subaru. Amelia, I myself have no room to deny those words. In reality, to say that me and him are close, wouldn't be a proper thing to say. Although in my eyes, we are compromising with each other, despite how things may look. Subaru, to put it as compromising, that's already condescending. Even more deprecating. It'll probably piss him off. Amelia, it's difficult to put it. I wonder what we should say to him. He sought for Amelia's agreement on his opinion of Julius, but she reacted to their exchanges by brushing up her hair and... Subaru, just as I thought, we are really close, right? Julius, come on. That's already clear. Subaru? Well, I guess we are close then. Subaru had a disagreement with Amelia, but Subaru and Julius acted as if nothing happened. This made Amelia become more and more baffled. Anastasia tried to hold herself back from laughing, letting out chuckles with a smile. Anastasia's reaction caused Julius to suddenly loosen his lips, as if indicating that he calmed down. That transient master and servant relationship was hardly suspicious to Subaru, being someone who's familiar with the opposite situation. The Anastasia at hand differed from the genuine Anastasia Hashin, because she was only on the same side of a spectrum for fakes. Anastasia's body is a body that the artificial spirit Echidna, nickname being Eridna, is currently using. This so-called Eridna had no intentions of capturing her body, but he was unsure of how much he could trust her. Being someone who was aware of this situation, the one thing that Subaru did not fail to do was look out for Amelia and Julius, who both were unaware of the situation while trying to avoid providing enlightenment at the same time. Beatrice, Subaru, cut it out. Beatrice said these words to Subaru, who was surely in a state of deep thought. This girl's hair was in a messy state, as Subaru was petting her head all throughout this period of silence. Her cute face had a sour look. Subaru will? My bad, Biko. Your cute appearance is a mess, your hair's all messed up now. Beatrice, perhaps you shouldn't make it sound like Betty's cuteness is ruined from just her hairdo. Moreover, your face is starting to look scary. Subaru lifted his butt off of his half of the seat as Beatrice said these words while frantically fixing her messed up hair with her hands. Subaru let out an oh, preventing himself from talking, as Beatrice held a face that made it look like she was indifferent to such incompetence. Beatrice, there's no point in making such an excessively worrisome face, I suppose. Betty will take care of it. If there's something, Betty is much quicker than Subaru when it comes to noticing it. Subaru, yeah. Beatrice said these things in response to Subaru's anxiety. This was Beatrice, the other person who knew about Iridna, and how she is occupying Anastasia. They promised 2 assertions that would conceal the truth. These 2 assertions were, first, Subaru would avoid causing any unnecessary commotion about it. And second, make sure that Iridna had no intentions to steal Anastasia's body away from her. However, Beatrice would be the only one to realize when something would be too late. These were the 2 beings that were the same type of artificial spirit, who had the same type of relation with the witch Echidna. If it seemed like Iridna was planning something, Beatrice would surely sense it. Although, if he were to consider Beatrice's emotions, he didn't feel like it would be very advisable for Beatrice to get involved with Echidna, but... Beatrice, putting your unnecessary suspicions aside, it's fine that you acted like yourself and sought help from anybody without caring about who it was, just like you always have. Though, you came to Betty first, I suppose. I'll give you my praise this time for that. She replied with this, so that was that. Emilia, I see it. Just when he thought that the dragon carriage went into a state of silence, Emilia suddenly whispered these words. It seemed that Emilia saw their destination afar in her eyes as she looked out the window of the dragon carriage. Subaru also understood how the view out the window was changing into familiar scenery. Subaru, what a nostalgic path. We'll arrive at Roswell's mansion soon, huh? He murmured these words, first making sure to restrain his feelings from being near their first checkpoint, remembering their original goal. This group's destination, the same destination as the one at the start, was the Augria Sand Dunes, the place where they would seek to speak with the sage Shala. However, they had already arranged to stop by Roswell's mansion on the way as a way to prepare for their trip, and to make a stop in their long expedition. There were many things that they wanted to talk to the camp about, including the incident at Pristella, and the occasion of getting to speak with the sage. Also, moreover, Subaru, it's not just a simple stop, okay? There was meaning behind dropping by Roswell's mansion before beginning their expedition to see the sage. The meaning would be the meagerness of the small world when seen through large eyes, but through Natsuki Subaru's small human eyes, it would be the meaning of a great possibility. The Subaru who squinted his eyes to vision the distant mansion that could not yet be seen. Each of the 4 people on the dragon carriage were looking at Subaru. They had various emotions in the colors of their eyes, but Subaru had no composure to take notice of any of their glances. It was later than 1 hour past noon when the dragon carriage arrived at Roswell's mansion. The long migration from Pristella City, which has gone on for only 10 days, went on a temporarily hold. Petra, Subaru. Subaru, oh, Petra, Woa. They rode the earth dragons towards Roswell's mansion, gave their thanks to the male driver, and then got off. A petite maid ran towards Subaru from the mansion and jumped at him with unrestrained force. She came into his chest with her might and force, and Subaru somehow managed to catch her while backing up. He then petted the head of the girl who flew into his arms. Subaru, Petra, if you do that so suddenly you'll startle me, you know. I've been gone for nearly a month now, but have you been doing well? Petra, I've been fine, as you can tell. However, Subaru, Sama has been having it rough, right? I've been worried ever since that letter came in 2 days ago. You were injured so much again, right? Can you handle the pain? Petra, tickle tickle. Petra touched Subaru's body to confirm his pain as her brown-dyed hair, with a tinge of red, swung back and forth. Subaru reacted to this with a wry smile, and then everyone else got off the dragon carriage. Subaru, hey, Petra. Do your job as a maid properly. If you don't, Ram and Frederica will get mad at you. Petra, okay. Tell me about what happened later. She returned promptly, but it seemed like Petra's trust was thoroughly damaged. Petra's worry would be inevitable if he told her about how he got involved in what seemed to be an uproar that affected the whole city to try and obtain the stone. Though, it wasn't an uproar that Subaru intended to cause for the witch's cult. However, that excuse would also be meaningless. It would be meaningless, considering the truth was that most of the witch cult's purposes were related to Amelia's camp. Petra, welcome guests. Compliments to your efforts to make this long trip. I am Petra Leti, a maid of the family. I will be your guide towards the mansion. Subaru's recollections were put aside, and then Petra let out a vocal message that was similar to one that you'd hear upon entering a temple. Julius took Anastasia's hand to help her get off the carriage, and they both descended with looks of admiration on their face. Emilia and Beatrice's somewhat prideful looks on their faces were also visible. Anastasia, you're quite the fit one even though you're little, huh? You're being thorough with your training. Julius, it certainly seemed like Subaru was a completely different person with his behavior after she jumped at him, huh? Anastasia, an embarrassing sight. Julius agreed with the smiling Anastasia, and then Petra's face started to blush from what they said. Julius looked down at her, and then proceeded to look at Subaru. Then, Julius, I see, so you are making people more and more fond of praising you as a little girl user. Subaru, I'll have you know, Petra isn't as small as a little girl, and even if you call me that, the only little girl I use is Biko. Get your facts straight. Beatrice, Betty also isn't a girl that works hard to be used by Subaru at his convenience, I suppose. Subaru, you should get your facts straight as well. Subaru replied to Julius' banter in a cold way, and then Beatrice rebuked Subaru in an even colder manner. Subaru's mouth turned into a frown. He became silent, and Beatrice let out a sigh. She then looked at the Petra's lower area. She stood with her, and then made a slight movement to grab onto the edge of her skirt. Beatrice, also, look. Not much has changed throughout Betty and Petra's time, I suppose. Wait a second. Betty feels like Petra has grown a bit. Her hair has grown a bit too, I suppose. Petra, it's because 1 month has passed, and it's also my growth period right now. My back will grow, and my hair will grow too, if I don't cut it. Beatrice John will stay small though. Beatrice, what the? Petra hugged Beatrice tightly, who let out a smile as she became astonished. She continued to hug Beatrice, who had an angry face for a sufficient amount of time, and then walked away as she said, well then, allow me to guide you all. Subaru, alright, we'll finally be going to the He sought to follow her, but then someone grabbed onto the back of his neck with her hands. When he raised his voice with a blocked throat and looked back, he surprisingly found out that Emilia was the one who grabbed onto his neck. The dragon carriage from the back jerked Subaru's chin while Emilia held onto the back of his neck. Emilia, Subaru, Petrash doesn't seem to be happy. Anastasia, this has become a selfish situation, huh? If you were to look at the earth dragons when Emilia made this point, out of the 2 earth dragons that they traveled with, you'd notice that the beautiful, jet-black earth dragon was glaring at Subaru with frightfully harsh eyes. This was Subaru's affectionate dragon, Petrash. When Subaru tried to return her look, she turned away bluntly. She then let out a light, but very displeased sound. Emilia, you seriously weren't able to make up with her, even though you had 10 days, huh? Subaru, yeah I know, but I really don't think it's my fault this time. Subaru scratched his head as he thought of what to do about Petrash, who was leaning onto his belly. Regarding the troubles that Petrash helped Subaru with up until now, looking back you'd see that ever since they left Pristella City, or well, let's move a bit before that. When he went to the Earth Dragon stable after defending off the witch's cult, he was already in a bad mood. He did not talk to Petrash, as he didn't want to leave Otto with his injures. She was understanding, simply because they've known each other for a long time. This affectionate dragon also tried to understand Subaru's anger over time. Subaru, well I know I neglected her during the uproar, and that I even made her feel lonely, but, Gafua. Emilia, Subaru. Subaru was on the very end of his statement when Petrash swung her tail at him, causing him to become covered in dirt after taking a direct hit. As expected, Petrash has no mercy in her attacks. If he were to reply to her in a deceitful way, she would come to strike him without any hesitation. Subaru, I would have never expected it. To think that I'd have too much protection after lacking protection against Regulus attack is just. Emilia, are you alright? Petrash decided to suddenly shake her tail again, but doesn't this mean that you'll get hit once more if you don't say the right thing? He received assistance from Emilia as she gave him her lap, and then he stood up as he heard Emilia's terrifying point. He looked at Petrash, and she certainly was there shaking her long tail. She cut through the air with the end of her tail as if to threaten Subaru. It felt like she was saying that she'd double the power for each mistake he'd make. He unconsciously lost the ability to speak properly, and his throat became cramped as he realized that he couldn't afford to reply carelessly. Julius, even if you're careless like that, your Earth Dragon has an overwhelming amount of sympathy towards you anyway. However, that statement made by Julius, who disheartened the start of his guidance, would cause an undesirable effect to come at Subaru. Subaru pointed at himself and Petrash in response to Julius' argument and. Subaru, really? I'm kinda covered in all this dirt, you know? You call this sympathy? Julius, if you ever felt proof of deep affection, you'd understand, wouldn't you? It's an emotional and complicated Earth Dragon. She's mad that she wasn't able to help you during that uproar, and she's mad at you for not seeking for her help. So it might just be a natural emergence of feelings, rather than anger towards you. Subaru, what are you saying? Just how high are you going to make her heroine power? Stop it. The level of correctness of Julius' points was unknown, but at the very least, his words made Patrash's tail swinging come to an end. Subaru looked at Patrash once again, and she turned away, just like always, but Emilia, looking at her now, it seems like she's kinda embarrassed after hearing that. Subaru, Emilia-tan, you noticed that too? I also noticed that. It makes my heart flutter, so don't do that too often please, Patrash. He said these words, reached out nervously with his hand, and then Patrash finally lowered her head, allowing Subaru to touch her body covered with tough scales. And with this, it seemed like the Cold War where he had 10 days to make men's ended on a good note. Petra, isn't that enough? Is everything fine now? Petra was showing her impatience as they continued to stay at the mansion's front garden without paying attention to the time. She came out here being instructed to guide them, and yet they still ate up so much time. Petra, if we don't return soon, Ram-ne-sama will get mad again and… Ram, if you can worry about those things, that means you were just a little bit short on your efforts. Petra P.A. Petra, who had been making light sounds with her footsteps, let out a shriek and then straightened her back. When she turned back, she saw a pink-haired maid from afar coming from the direction of the mansion. It was Ram, no mistake nor doubt about it. Ram slowly turned her gaze towards Subaru's group and the guests after Petra became as still as a stone statue from her glare and… Ram, even when I thought that you got better at your work, to see this situation when I was just about to recognize your efforts, Ram is really disappointed. Petra, so sorry Ram-ne-sama, about my work, you were about to recognize me? Ram, yes. Your cooking is better than Ram's, your cleaning is more sensible than Ram's, you're better at doing laundry than Ram, and you wake up earlier than Ram, so I was close to recognizing you. Subaru, you should have more doubt when you point these things out. Just how worse was this veteran maid in comparison with this girl who had 1 year of experience as a maid? Even if you were to take Petra's ability to learn quickly into account, the hurdle was so low that it wasn't even worth considering. Ram snorted her nose in a way that Subaru was completely familiar with in response to his shouting and… Ram, how does one proceed to have doubt about oneself? Ram only holds expectations and self-confidence for herself. Subaru, I always felt like that part about you is the one thing that really deserves respect. Subaru responded to Ram's majestic declaration like this while being astounded. In reality, there was reason in learning from Ram's optimism, or rather, there was reason in learning from her fortitude. He just wished that she would be a bit more reflective of herself, but… Subaru, if you did that, I guess it wouldn't really feel like you'd be the real Ram, huh? Ram, that's a scary thought. Moreover, I don't think it'd be ideal to leave guests out here for so long. Let's hurry up and enter the mansion. Subaru went into agreement in response to Ram's dismissive words. They ate up too much time outside the mansion. It wouldn't be surprising for Frederica, and even Roswell to show up eventually if they ended up wasting any more time. Candidates of the king's election and the chief of the territory were gathered, but the question was what were they doing? Subaru, is Roswell making his way towards the mansion? Ram, who began walking to guide the others, tapped Petra's shoulder to relieve her stiffness. When Emilia tried to call out to Ram from behind, she replied with a yes without taking a look back. Ram, fortunately, he said that you all could stay at the mansion when the letter came in. He left it with that. There was a summary in the letter about Pristella, and there should be things that are filled with details in there. Subaru, yeah there should be, considering a lot of things did happen. Ram, there's a complete difference in the amount of people here now in comparison to when you first left, huh? Did GAF and Otto die? Subaru, like hell I'd let them die. They aren't dead. I was just late in returning to them when they were left with injuries. When he sought to ask about what details were in the letter, his comedic retort came out instead. Ram let out a shrug with an indifferent manner in response. Ram, I'm all too familiar with the depths of men who lack composure. Barussa's especially is one that has an open hole where your contents are being poured out, so you should be careful. To have people become aware of your depths, and then finding out you're empty inside is the worst. Subaru, that really hurts, so cut that out. Also, moreover, if the letter that was sent to the mansion from Pristella before their departure, if those details were written in the letter, they should understand that this wasn't just a simple trip back for Subaru and the others. Therefore, when Subaru tried to confirm the contents of the second half of the letter, and when he decided on his words, Ram readily raised her finger. Ram, I told you, didn't I? Don't worry. Roswell said you're free to stay. Also, preparations have been made for both the Sleeping Beauty and the confinement room. Although… She cut off her words toward Subaru at the end and then gently licked her lips. She wet her lips with the red tip of her tongue with a gesture that had a sense of gracefulness embellished somewhere with it and said this. Ram, although neither of them were Ram's doings. It was Frederica and Petra's job. Subaru, why did you make a prideful face there? Anyhow, even if this was a meeting after a whole month, she still remained to be the same like this. Chapter 2, His Way of Providing a Warm Welcome. This is a bit sudden, but the base for Amelia's camp, Roswell's mansion, is actually different from the mansion that burnt down in the past in that it's now instead the principal residence of Mather's territory. However, the layout of the mansion didn't differ from the layout it had in the past, as it was formatted in a familiar way. The book wing was placed in the center, and west and east wing buildings were established to the left and right. It was also formatted this way so that the spaciousness would be just about the same. Even if they were to walk around inside, they would seldom come across confusing things. The only problem is that it was just a bit too similar, making it more probable to forget about how the Alam village was no longer nearby. There were several occasions where Subaru would wake up with energy, seek to do radio calisthenics one on the way to the village, and then in the middle of this long road, he'd realize that he didn't know which way to turn next. Beatrice would subsequently catch up to him in a fuss, and she would be really angry. Anyways, they arrived at Roswell's mansion, got welcomed by the same old Petra and Ram, and entered the parlor where Roswell, the chief of the mansion, awaited them. But Roswell, oh, welcome back. It is great that you came back safe. Roswell sits on the couch as he claps his hands, welcoming them on their return. Subaru and Amelia were reflexively taken aback by Roswell's welcome that was full with smiles. They looked at his excessive and amicable smile, and then they looked at each other. Subaru, Amelia Tan, was anything weird written in the letter? Amelia, I don't know, okay. Moreover, didn't you even go as far as to prepare a weird gift? Because you know Subaru and Roswell have secret talks sometimes, so. Subaru, and no way. And even if I were to plan on giving Roswell a gift, I would put in my usual gratitude and I'd consult Amelia Tan, Beatrice, Petra, Frederica, Patrash, and maybe even Ram to help me think of a way to reduce the amount of time and money needed for the gift. Beatrice, those were only names of girls, I suppose. Subaru, isn't it embarrassing for me to ask people like Otto and Garfield about a gift as a man to another man? Subaru responded to the displeased Beatrice, and then he gave a wry smile in response to Amelia's scornful eyes. By the way, he deliberately left out Rem's name in order to avoid causing anxiety for the others, so don't get him wrong, he did feel guilty about it. Anyhow, Roswell, who was witnessing the whole exchange, shrugged his shoulders and... Roswell, what a surprising reaction. I worry about your guys' safety, so I wonder what's so weird about me being glad that you're all safe. It's all natural, right? Amelia, that's true, but Roswell, you haven't really showed that side of yourself to us that much until now, so. Roswell, I've also had various changes in my way of thinking this past year. Shouldn't Amelia-sama be a bit happy about me becoming cooperative? Amelia, You're right. Amelia responds to Roswell's brazen rejection in a way that was typical of her tolerant self as she accepts a change in her thoughts. He nods his head at Amelia, and just seeing her waving her palms back and forth made Subaru unable to leave it at this inadequate level of trust, but... Beatrice, even if you were to try to understand his way of thinking, it wouldn't be possible because it's too odd. Subaru is also a little that, but the ness of that is more, I suppose. Subaru, you're being too vague with your words. He pets the head of Beatrice, who seemed to have chosen to put in vague and senile words into her remark, and then moves towards Amelia as he steps into the parlor. The cheery Roswell, they doubted him, but they were somehow aware of his ulterior motive. In reality, he actually did speak of his motive himself just a moment ago. Roswell was seriously glad about Subaru and Amelia coming back safe. He no longer had his book of wisdom. Being amiable was the best move to make in order to fulfill his plans that he had not yet revealed. His only objective was to have Subaru's actions break the obstacles that stood in the way. Subaru, if you feel that way, then that's fine. Though, it'd be helpful if you were a little cooperative. Roswell, you will reach your goal with or without my help. That is why I believe my cooperation is an unnecessary portion of your power. It's really not an even relationship. Subaru, it feels like I'm suffering an arrangement in an RPG, because the supporting character would be too cliché to use. It was an arrangement where the extremely powerful supporting character would do anything but participate in the battle. It was a treatment that was also close to how Roswell abstained from participating in battles. In his case, he would become more and more entertained while he continued to sit back and watch Subaru, someone who believed in his own power to change fate with his ability returned by death, take desperate measures, continuing to drive himself deeper and deeper into predicaments. He was a cunning fellow, which made Subaru want to click his tongue. Anastasia, isn't it about time you introduce us as well? Subaru, sorry to have you guys wait. Roswell, they're visitors. Allow them to seat themselves. Roswell, I'm listening. Nevertheless, you have some interesting members. The girl who waited out the corridor speaks out to the people standing at the entrance having a conversation. Subaru lets out a light apology to them, and then makes a hand gesture to Roswell, who is sitting at the couch, signaling him to let them in. Roswell stands up and then sits back down in the chief seat with dead silence. He then appoints them over to the visitor's sofa. Subaru and the others slowly rest their backs onto the sofa that faced towards Roswell. Roswell, welcome to an even further distant place. The last time we spoke to each other face to face like this was at the recognition ceremony. Anastasia, that's true. Also, it wasn't as if we spoke to each other in a proper conversation. This essentially is the first time it'll feel like we'll be speaking to each other. The recognition ceremony that came up in this conversation was the formal recognition of the suppression of the white whale accomplished by the combination of the Amelia camp, Anastasia camp, and Crush camp. It was a ceremony where they were evaluated. Albeit the ceremony carried out in the royal castle of the king's capital was small scale, they did discuss about the problem of the sanctuary. The camp representatives gathered to talk about the sanctuary, and all of the members immediately after solving the issue were naturally involved in the ceremony. He had vivid memories of Otto having a tense, pale face, and the castle shining within Garfield's eyes, although Roswell nonchalantly decided to participate even after all those intense reactions. What a guy! Well, Otto did have tension, but Amelia also quickly matched his tension, so Subaru couldn't really say much about it. Amelia's tension made sense considering how she was being praised for achievements she didn't even have memory of achieving. Anyways, that's a meeting from the past. Mutual greetings were carried out in a hurried manner. And now the conversation would immediately move on to the main topic, the report for the city of Pristella. Roswell, and just like the letter said, Otto and Garfield have withdrawn because of their injuries. I see. Understood. These achievements are truly promising. Roswell lets out an admirable sigh as he lets out these words after hearing the report. This makes Amelia raise her eyebrows as she lets out a hey with a slightly strong tone in her voice. Amelia, they were injured so badly that they couldn't even return. Yet, you still put it like that. What are you trying to say? Roswell, let's refrain from jumping to any hasty conclusions. Yes, it is heartbreaking that they were injured like that, and yes, their forced, temporary withdrawal was no less heartbreaking than their wounds. However, on the other hand, no fatal damage can be hidden by the camp. If you include the other camps and consider the encounters with several of the Sin archbishops, successfully hiding that damage would really be a miraculous outcome. Roswell, the scars caused by the Sin archbishops should of course be treated promptly, but everyone's inflicted damage was kept to the bare minimum thanks to Amelia-sama and the city's defense. I think that you should recognize that for yourself. Amelia, oh. Thanks. Amelia gives her thanks with an unconvinced face in response to Roswell pointing out various things. In actuality, his words should have strongly sounded like a sound argument. However, it is important to consider the impression of the speaker. Subaru felt like his impression was shady, and all the others probably thought so too. Roswell, well, putting the question of people's thoughts on me aside, shall we move on to something else? By the way, the person who called an Amelia-sama to Pristella with that kind of riot should have been Anastasia-sama, but what do you have to say about that? Anastasia, it was inexcusable to have her dragged into the middle of that uproar. If you want me to apologize, I will do it properly, as I am mentally prepared to do so. Roswell, and if you sincerely bow your head, this would end without your payment, not having a single cent to give. Oh, but you don't need to apologize to me. Didn't Amelia-sama already turn you down too? Amelia, well, shouldn't the blame be put on the witch cult if they were the ones to cause mischief? I shouldn't have obligations for Anastasia, she merely requested for our assistance. Also, it's not like we accomplished our goals that we were summoned out to Pristella for. Roswell casts a side glance, to which Amelia responds by feeling the pendant worn on her neck. A new big demon jewel is inside this pendant. Even now, a fast asleep big spirit is quietly awaiting for its revival as it continues to sleep. Puck obtaining the highly pure crystal gem, which would become his Yurishiro, that's something the camp was certainly achieving with their goals, something that was no less than what he was aiming for. Amelia, also, isn't it possible that the witch cult left because we were just casually there? If you think about it that way, it should be seen as Anastasia's achieving. Anastasia, to think of it as that much would of course be too supportive to the other camp, so I'm gonna stop you there. For some reason, Anastasia turns Amelia's words of optimism into words of support. However, Roswell's current questioning was just trying to keep people in check. In actuality, it is possible that most of the witch cult's aims were brought into Pristella by Subaru and the others. If that were to be pointed out, the atmosphere would become heavy, even with the certainty of the witch's evil. Thus, it would be in their best interest to avoid establishing the opinion, let's work together. The witch cult is the worst. Subaru, I used my gate there, and the other three groups ended up being understanding too. One Sin archbishop also died, and one was captured. Man, one thing was happening after another with the witches' cult. Roswell, though, their organization skills are a bit dubious. In their case, speaking of cooperation and unity would make them seem like an outlaw group without relations to each other. Even if they were to lose one of their allies and someone was left alone in the end, that lone lunatic's psyche wouldn't be repaired. Subaru, I agree with you when you say that. Subaru agrees with Roswell's opinion, so he probably had the right idea. The so-called witch cult organization was now more of a combined team of lunatics more than an actual organization. They couldn't bring themselves to have any type of innocent way of thinking now that they lacked organization. They did not think to simply be obedient from now on. The remaining gluttony and lust's brutality would never be stopped. Subaru, that's why we need to find a way to resist them. The next thing I'll talk about is related to such. Roswell, it's coming in touch with the sage, Shala, huh? Subaru, I know that it's not gonna be easy, but I'll have no choice but to try it as long as I can't come up with any other measure. Finally, an omnipotent and omniscient. Or well, let's say omniscient. If a sage like that exists, there's no harm in just going to have her listen, right? Roswell, although, everybody in these past hundreds of years who have tried that ended up suffering a big loss by paying with their lives. He depicts this common knowledge, and it certainly was a disturbing view of the situation. However, they had something up their sleeves for that reason. Anastasia gives a gesture of slight acknowledgement with her chin when Subaru exchanges looks with her. Then, Anastasia, there's where I come in. Fortunately, I have a way we can make it to the Sage Watchtower safely. So there's no reason to worry about getting lost. Does that calm your worries? Roswell, well, even if you tell me to just believe you with your words, first of all, even if you do have this method, you have many comrades who would want more even after being paid a great amount of money. Why are you the only one that? Anastasia, money is certainly important to me as a trader. However, there are things in this world that can't be replaced with money. This is among one of those things. Anastasia hits her thin chest as she exaggerates the magnificence of Eridna. She was pretending to be Anastasia, but that one word had a wondrous power, a power that astonished Subaru, even while he knew about how Anastasia wasn't her original self as of right now. Anastasia looks into Roswell's eyes. He responds by closing one of his own, and then glares at her for a brief period with just his single yellow eye. Then, Roswell, good grief. This is why it's hard to deal with people who understand fighting and gambling. Moreover, it's not like Emilia-sama will agree with this either. Emilia, I believe that you're being a bit rude by coming to these conclusions by yourself. Roswell, but you won't go as far as to ask me to stop doing it. It's fine though. You'll dare to proceed in choosing this thorny path. That's where he'll accompany you as well. Roswell responds in a half-hearted way, though he was interested in how they would get there after all. The height of the hurdle Subaru had to climb over would become higher depending on Emilia's choice of this difficult road. This is because it resembled a hope that would replace the Book of Wisdom in Roswell's point of view, as of right now. Subaru, anyways, will come across some sort of desert based off of Anastasia's information, although it'll cause some amount of days to pass by again. Julius, it's not just some sort of desert, it's the Ogria Sand Dunes. You've made this mistake so many times now, so how about you hurry up and remember it correctly already? Julius puts in his input as he lets out a sigh in reaction to Subaru's vague memory. The person that has been watching and sitting on the sofa in silence the whole time next to Anastasia looks at Roswell with an intellectual look and Julius, in regards to what Roswell said, I do believe it's a very difficult proposal to take in. However, the city of Pristella is still exposed to the witch cult's tyranny, and there's a vast amount of people who've had their mind and body damaged because of it. If we could somehow do something to be of assistance to them, then I would like to wish to have permission to do so. Roswell, you have quite a graceful way with words. It appears that you are an owner of extraordinary abilities, but it makes no sense how I have no recollections of that. Which means that. Right. Roswell understood the situation just from knowing how he was someone who Julius had no memories of. Julius looks slightly downwards, then Roswell rests his chin on his hand of the arm that he had placed on the armrest of his chair. He then loosens his lips with a sense of cheerfulness and Roswell, everybody forgets about the person affected by gluttony's authority. It feels like being left behind by the world. In order to avoid putting yourself behind, you'll seek a thin amount of hope by heading to the Sage Shala. It's not like you need to make an excuse about how it's for someone's sake. Julius, by no means am I taking such movements for such self-interests like that. Roswell, I am not blaming you. It's actually a natural thing, so I like it better that way. Doing anything for yourself over doing basically anything for someone else's sake becomes desperation. Even if you saved other people as a result with your actions, feeling satisfaction and feeling achievement from doing so, there'd be no need to deny your condescending heart. Julius' face stiffens. Roswell responds by continuing carefully. His face turns into an even deeper smile under his clown makeup. Then, Roswell, and even more, if you save them, then there's a high chance that other people will be saved in the same way as well. You even carry a just cause on your shoulder with your actions, so there's no need for you to take a little blame, right? Julius, Anastasia, chief of the Mathers territory, may I ask you to stop there? Anastasia restrains Julius with her hand and then takes his place to face Roswell. She let out an elegant smile and then tilted her lovely head. And then, Anastasia, I also have no memories of him, but even then, this child seems to be my knight. That's why I don't feel right when I watch him being bullied while he's not able to do anything about it. Roswell, you're saying that the bond between a master and a servant still exists between you two even when he has disappeared from your memories? Anastasia, I wonder. I'm also not too certain about that. I didn't feel like his worries were natural along the trip though, moreover. Anastasia gently raises her finger and points towards the sofa of the meeting. Then, Anastasia, they've all been here this whole time. Do you view tearing your camp apart as protection? Roswell, my oh my. In response to Anastasia's points, Roswell looks at Subaru, who is on the verge of eruption, and then shrugs his shoulders. Subaru was on the verge of shouting. Naturally, Emilia and Beatrice were on the edge of doing so as well. You could have said that Roswell gave into the situation, as he raised both of his hands in resignation. Roswell, okay. I'm sorry about this. Though, I do think that I was just pointing out the possibility of a certain aspect. Subaru, that was unnecessary. You really need to stop with your bullshit. Roswell, was it though? You will most likely come across people who don't care about how many people benefit from the outcome, distrustful comrades who bring you down with abusive complaints. It seemed like you weren't aware of that possibility, so I just thought to advise you to anticipate it. You're not doing this for someone's sake. You're doing it for your own. As a matter of fact, Subaru also had an experience held within him in the form of a pitiful wound where he was berated for his actions like that. He once told Emilia at the royal castle that he was acting for her sake, but she responded by saying that he was acting for his own sake. As a result, he wouldn't be able to easily forget about the pain from it. That was a definite truth. However, he got a taste of it through his harmful intentions, whether it had been the truth or not. But just because he did doesn't mean that. Subaru, it's not as if the feeling of accomplishment decreases depending on the amount of people who approve of one's actions. As if this person is like that. Stop it. Roswell, it can't be helped, right? Because unlike you, I'm not familiar with his personality. Although your relationship with him doesn't seem like just one that you'd have from a trip where you accompanied him for a few days. Roswell looks down at Subaru, who lost his temper. In just this moment, Roswell's eye that bordered his long eyelashes becomes dark with a full-blown sense of tragedy. Then, Roswell, this means that you're the only one who remembers again. Just like how you're the only one who remembers REM. Subaru though, I do wonder what kind of fate this is. Roswell, it's proof that you're special. You should care for it. You should treasure it. Because there are many things out there that cannot be obtained even when you wish for it. Nobody besides Roswell himself followed the second half of his recollection. However, even if he were to continue asking questions until he shed light on it, Roswell would not let out the truth, so Subaru quickly gave up on the situation. Anyhow, things that needed to be said should have been said now. Next would be Subaru, just like the letter said, the confinement room and Roswell, and the Sleeping Beauty will be taken out, yes. Although, I was sure that you really hated people touching her. Subaru, a way to wake her up might be found, so I'll try it. Isn't that a given? Roswell, I was surprised when I found out that you'd first try this measure with that girl. You give off the impression of an egoist, but you're actually self-punishing with this part of the matter. Don't you think that somewhere in your heart, somewhere in the corner of your mind that you should be the one to save her from the start? He hit the bullseye, and Subaru reflexively sunk into silence. He continued to worry about if there would be other victims to be afflicted with the same case as REM by gluttony up until they were just before the mansion on their trip to Pleiades. Getting REM to wake up of course wouldn't even allow him to forget about that worry. If there was a possibility for her to wake up, he wished for her to hurry up and do so, even if it was just for a day, even if it was just for a single second. However, the certainty of Subaru being the one to do it was a different matter. All those people in the city of Pristella are suffering the same kind of damage as REM. It was a situation where the sleeping people weren't even capable of worrying about how their families felt about them being taken away. The more Subaru thought about it, the more he felt the piercing of a strange wedge. It was the feeling of guilt from saving her first over a multitude of other people. This is why he had hesitated this time as well about taking REM out all the way up until just now, but Emilia, I've already convinced Subaru, so there's no problem. Roswell, this is quite surprising. The person that said this to Roswell was Emilia. She takes place of Subaru, who is in a state of silence. Roswell is doubtful, but he looks at Emilia, who is puffed up with pride, and then closes one of his eyes. Then, Roswell, you say that, but wouldn't her awakening be troublesome for Emilia-sama? Subaru-kun has strong feelings for that girl, no matter how you look at it. In fact, they're as strong as the feelings he has for you. Emilia, yeah. I think that's right. Subaru will devote himself to that girl for a while, and he might stop caring about me as well. Subaru, no. Under no circumstances would that happen. It shouldn't happen. He swears that his feelings towards Emilia would not waver from now on either. It's just that his feelings for Emilia were a different part of the entirety of his feelings. Him having strong feelings towards REM is a fact, and just like Emilia said, if she were to wake up, there was no doubt that he'd become devoted to her. However, she says it's fine to Subaru. Then, Emilia, if it makes Subaru turn the other way, that just means that I'll be the one this time to do my best for you to turn my way. I'm not worried about Subaru suddenly not being there. Therefore, I'll also have you come my way, no matter how madly in love you become with REM with how cute she is. Subaru? Emilia-tan. Emilia, that is my resolve, and that is what I have decided. Moreover, nobody will complain about you saving her. So it's fine. Let's wake up REM. Emilia supports Subaru's decision with her strong words. Those words had some sort of sound that seemed like a confession. It surprised Subaru and made his knees shake. There were many times when Emilia told him things that sounded like affection they happened, but in none of those times did she go over the level of her deep affection. Emilia, to me, to REM, to Beatrice, to Petra, to Patrash, to Otto Cohen, to Garfield, we all want you to be really, really happy. Subaru, though you did mix an earth dragon with men at the latter half of your statement. She mixed in a lowly at the middle too. Anyhow, he accepts this, and then Beatrice poked his shoulder, who was sitting beside him. Subaru lets out an ooh-hee, and then looks to his side. Beatrice had her usual face of disappointment. Beatrice, it's not like I'm going to complain about Subaru's tendency to fool around with girls, but my hand is always free, I suppose. This is the Betty-only special privilege. Subaru, you're ridiculously cute. Beatrice, that's a given, I suppose. Betty's charm resounds to the gods of heaven and earth. He didn't go as far as to care about what the gods of heaven and earth thought about this, but it did resound in Subaru's heart. Subaru was supported by Emilia and Beatrice, and would work hard to wake up REM. He longer hesitated about doing this. Subaru, so that's that, Roswell. Sorry for being loved so much. REM will be taken out. Roswell, you'll just surprise Emilia-sama and Beatrice-sama when you make them sound like alternates like that. It's fine, do whatever you want. I never planned on stopping you anyway. Subaru, alrighty, then about the talk from before. Roswell, I was feeling concerned and just wanted to make sure that you understood the meaning of my actions. I also hurt your guy's incredible, nameless knight so. Subaru, it's okay. Roswell spoke in a way that felt like banter until the very end. Julius inhales slightly, and when he exchanges looks with Anastasia. Julius, I am Julius Jacolius. This only remains within his memory as of right now, but I am an imperial knight of the kingdom of Lugnica. I am not so inept that my heart would be perturbed by something like this. He makes his declaration like this, and did a splendid job on brushing aside the pestering from the wicked evilness of sorcerers. Subaru, not very firm. Julius, just whose side are you on again? I feel like I've just been stabbed in the back. He sneaks in his last statement just after the ending of their conversation. The conversation had ended, and then Subaru and the others left the parlor. They headed towards the confinement room that resided in the east wing of the mansion. They headed over there in order to come in contact with this person who possibly held an opportunity to grab a hold of an essential key in reaching the Augria sand dunes. She was brought into the confinement room around a year ago when the previous mansion burned down, the same time when residents of the mansion migrated over, and has been kept there ever since then. She wasn't really the type of person you'd want to come in contact with, and it wasn't really safe either, but... Roswell, I wonder what kind of results will they bring? I wonder if this also means that I'm influencing them again by giving them expectations. Roswell rests the weight of his back onto the sofa as he sinks deeply into it while grumbling these words. One person was left in the parlor. The sorcerer thought over the lingering memory of the previous discussion, had someone come to mind, and then let out a slight laugh. Then, Roswell, does this mean that I'm becoming a pleasing member to him too? What do you think? Beatrice, you sure can say some disgusting things is what I think, I suppose. You really have no limits, I suppose. It's frightening, there's no other way to put it, I suppose. Roswell, it's not like I lack honor the more this body reaches its end. Beatrice, you were a woman before as well. You have enough precautions, I suppose. Roswell makes an increasingly cheerful smile, and then the little GI Beatrice, who responded to his statement, started to play with her own hair as she pulled on it with a composed expression. It might have been because she was bored, or perhaps it was a habit she'd do when getting nervous. Roswell, Subaru-kun and the rest are going to the confinement room, you know? Don't you think he's unsafe without you by his side? Beatrice, a pet dog that strengthens its own spirit is more of a burden than a stray dog that has times where it loses its spirit. That's why I thought to keep him in check, I suppose. Roswell, calling him a pet dog is cruel. Though I think that would be something he'd want if it meant being Sensei's dog. Beatrice, he is a helpless pervert. Roswell, don't underestimate him too much, I suppose. If you turn him on unnecessarily, Betty won't forgive you. Roswell let out a smile with a hint of lewdness as Beatrice suddenly educated him like this with a bitter face. Roswell removes his smile afterwards, and just like always, he closes his one eye, his blue eye, and then returns Beatrice's look with his yellow eye. Roswell, you and I act different when it's just us two. I act wholeheartedly, while you act carefree. Beatrice, that would mean that you see a side of me that is completely different from a mother. The Betty that holds Subaru's hand is several hundreds times better, so how about you refrain from offending me like that? Roswell, that's something that you've become able to admit. Someone like you who pretends to be a librarian of a prohibited library should become as happy as she can. Beatrice, that's a given. Which is why I'll have you allow me to act in order to protect that happiness, I suppose. Beatrice contests Roswell with an equivalent level of intensity within her eyes as she stands in front of him, while he remains seated on the sofa. Roswell squints his eye as if to attempt to peek into the heart of that round-eyed girl and... Roswell, a single person defeated the Sin Archbishops. Subaru-kun most likely thinks that more than one did it. Beatrice, there should be candidates other than Subaru that help defeat them. Roswell, but none of them come close to him nor do they go on top of him. It's a self-evident truth, whether it be just grazing him, whether it be going on top of him. Stop making it seem like they did more than what they actually did. Beatrice, I won't let you say much more, I suppose. Beatrice responds to Roswell's argument with a voice that was coated with the determination that she previously hid from Roswell. She grabs tightly onto her arm's sleeve, and then glared at Roswell. Beatrice, Betty is Subaru's Betty. Therefore, Subaru will be himself, I suppose. Roswell, I don't mean to hinder your efforts. It's just that having fewer people to acknowledge would be more convenient for me. That's all. Beatrice gives a strong glare at Roswell at the end, and then she surely headed towards the door. The remainder of the discussion was also put to an end. Roswell, Beatrice. Roswell speaks out to the faraway girl. Beatrice stopped walking, but she doesn't turn around. Roswell, you see Beatrice, I want you to be happy, or at least always be stronger than all the other masses. This is what I feel, and that's because you're like a younger sister to me. Beatrice, that doesn't make me very happy. Moreover, you're not a mother. Roswell, isn't that what love is? She didn't respond. She simply opens the door, and then only sound to be heard throughout the parlor was the quiet sound of her closing the door. And after that, not a single sound was left within the parlor. Chapter 3, A Little Girl's Cell. Frederica, how'd your talk with Roswell-sama go? Subaru, you could say that it went as normal as always and that he irritated me more than usual. Give me some sympathy here. Frederica, I'll just give you an IC. Subaru's group left the parlor, and Frederica had guided them towards the mansion's east wing. This scary-faced hostess with her beautiful, long blonde hair with her courteously worn maid outfit, politely finally exchanged greetings with Anastasia and Julius as one of the mansion's honest maids, and talked to Subaru like that, who started to walk with discouragement. Frederica, was Goffjohn useful in your guy's journey and at the city? For him to get heavily injured to the point of not being able to come back even when I told him specific instructions, I'm worried about him causing trouble for Emilia-sama and the others. Emilia, no, don't worry about it. We made Garfield work really hard, after all. He's resting along with Otto-kun right now without causing any trouble. Well, I'm not so sure about the no trouble part. I hope that they aren't. But anyways, we did request that they rest. Frederica, my apologies for having my foolish younger brother cause you trouble. Emilia was in half-doubt and didn't finish her follow-ups, while Frederica offered her apologies. Anyhow, Garfield was someone that worried Petra, Ram, Roswell, and Frederica with his behavior, but his mentality changed in some way or another during the incident at Pristella. If you had to describe it, you could say that he matured. He definitely matured. Garfield's strength already stood out as a 15-year-old boy. He was still far from being able to boast himself as the strongest with his strength if you considered the Guts hunting battle and the 8 arms battle. But even then, he certainly had a level of strength that contended with not just the Amelia camp, but the superiors of the whole continent as well. The biggest problem was still probably his immature mentality. If he could control his mental frailness, he would move up to the stage above. It's just that, well, that also was something that shouldn't be rushed. This is because steadily and assuredly becoming stronger to step firmly over the stairs to the next stage was an appropriate way to mature for a 15-year-old. Also, Subaru, there's another reason for him not coming back right away this time. Emilia, are you talking about Mimi? Subaru, there's that too, but... Emilia cuts into the conversation as if through sharp hearing, and Subaru gives her a wry smile. Even Emilia, someone who was poorly informed on love and relationships, seemed to be interested in the love affairs of other people to some extent. She was very interested in Garfield and Nini's relationship. Of course, Garfield also risked his life and protected himself, which probably caused Mimi to have feelings for him, as she clearly expressed her affection both before and after battle. Frankly speaking, there's no man out there who wouldn't shake upon being struck with affection from a girl he didn't hate. Subaru was also no exception. Subaru couldn't say anything about that phenomenon, considering he was one that experienced it before. He wanted to monitor the changes that would happen from now on, considering how Garfield loved Ram and the uncertainty of how he'd respond to Mimi's feelings. But that was a different concern to think about. Garfield had a concern left in Pristella City. Frederica, Subaru-sama? Do you need to ask me something? Subaru, no, not anything in particular. It wouldn't be right for me to talk about this matter. He looked at Frederica's face with a profound look, and then she asked about its meaning. He thinks about Garfield's true feelings while covering up her doubt. At Pristella, a family that Garfield worried about it was a family that had golden hair and green eyes, which were traits that would remind one of Frederica and Garfield, who were brother and sister. Garfield's relationship with them was like his relationship with Frederica. Surely Garfield wanted to be proud of it, and wanted to report it to his family, Frederica and Ryozu. Subaru, so I will say nothing. Natsuki Subaru will leave it at that in an ultra-cool way. Emilia, oh, speaking of Garfield, some really friendly children were at Pristella. About those children. Subaru, Emilia-tan, you're gonna make my monologue go to waste. His explanation was turning into waste, so Subaru stopped Emilia from talking. The synergy would be scary if he left it as it is, so he decided that he would make the time to properly explain the gist of the setting later. Subaru waved his hand with a forced smile at Frederica, whose face became more and more puzzled. Frederica, sorry to interrupt you guys while you're happily heating up your intimacy, but where are you guys headed? Subaru, oh, it's this place called the confinement room. The person that we talked about before is there. Julius, the usual person, huh? I wonder if the conversation will go well. Subaru, it's something that hasn't been done before, so I dunno. Anyways, I'll at least try asking to make sure. Julius responds to Subaru's explanation by going into deep thought with a complex face as he follows him from behind. In reality, Subaru was also aware of the amount of problems that were related to this proposal. However, if it did go well, then they could lower the risk of their journey by a considerable amount. Emilia, also that girl is relatively familiar, Subaru, so shouldn't it be fine? Subaru, that girl is more familiar with Garfield than she is with me. Don't assume that I might be pleased with the cat-like part of her. Subaru reacts to Emilia's optimism like this with a wry smile, and then Frederica stopped walking. Subaru and Emilia also stop walking, and then they clearly enter into a different atmosphere level in this mansion. This was the real Roswell mansion that was generally arranged so that it wasn't different from the mansion from before. However, the basement part of the eastern wing, this was the only place that had a clear difference from the previous mansion. At the center of the mansion, there was the main center wing that concentrated the facilities needed for one's daily life. It had a west wing with multi-purpose facilities, such as maids and the guest rooms. And then there was the eastern wing that had a history of the Mathers family inheritance, a place that acted as a storehouse/safe where things like books were kept. The only place that was different in the eastern wing was its basement. There was a clear goal inside of the cold, stone room of the basement of the noble mansion. Anastasia, quite an unpleasant atmosphere floating around in this place, huh? Anastasia snorts her nose and then frankly comments on the change in the atmosphere. There was no denial to her view on the atmosphere, so it was indeed a clear assessment that everyone agreed with. The atmosphere that drifted about in this level of the mansion could not be described in any way other than an atmosphere that gave off an unpleasant feeling. Anastasia, it still seems different than a miasma, but it certainly does not give off a good feeling to the body. Julius, other than the matter of the building structure, first of all, this establishment's purpose. Well, it's not unrelated to that, but I do believe that this structure allows someone to ultimately be hid inside of it. Anastasia and Julius looked down at the continuous stairs that headed down the basement of the mansion filled with darkness as they exchanged these words. They were already talking about the confinement room. Those two started to think of the close to endless answers behind the meaning of the establishment that was located at the basement. Frederica, well then. I will be guiding you all now. Please be careful to avoid tripping. Frederica said these words and then guided them down the stairs. Subaru and the rest followed this tall woman from behind as they headed down the basement. Julius also had a face that indicated that he prepared himself for what was ahead. Their footsteps made while walking on the stone stairs resounded very clearly throughout the space they were in. A cold breeze blew upwards from the basement, causing his bangs to shake slightly, which got on his nerves to an incomprehensible extent. Frederica, I'm going to open it. When they descended towards the basement, they were blocked by an iron door right in front of them. The door had many solid locks installed onto it. Frederica released several of them one by one. The key to the door makes a sound, the locks are undone, and then the door opens with a creaking noise. A stone pathway is spread out beyond the door, and they see another door yet again deep inside this place. Frederica, the person you're looking for lies beyond this door. When she stepped back towards the side of the door, she made way for them to enter, and then bowed. They give acknowledging gestures with their chins in response to her bow, and the four people head straight towards the door to lead Subaru. No lock was set on the door at the deepest part of the basement. He reaches for the doorknob. If he were to push it open, there was a possibility that he would be able to see the inside. When Subaru nervously came in contact with the door, he started to have trouble breathing as he looks back. Amelia, Julius and Anastasia all stared at Subaru's actions. They nod their heads at Subaru, and then he takes a deep breath. He then puts strength into his arm that grips on the knob. It makes a sound, then he pushes the door open and... Roar, roar. 3M gonna eat you. Kya? Help me. No. Goo hee hee hee. Nobody will come save you even if you cry for help like that. The door opens. A lovely voice can be heard as the pathway becomes bathed in light. A lone girl is seen inside the room on the other side of the open door. A multitude of dolls are placed around her. Her back faces towards the others while she continues to play with the dolls using both of her hands. She changes into an imitative voice, though they didn't know what exactly she was imitating. Nonetheless, she was pretty into it. Nope, they're coming. Because they were arranged to come here in times of need after all, This girl who stood up suddenly notices something as she holds onto her small, female dolls in her arms. She looks back timidly, sees Subaru and the others standing still at the entrance dumbfounded, and then opened her round, large eyes. She had braided, light brown hair, and had simple but lovely facial features. Subaru, sup? How have you been? Subaru said these words and raised his hand to her as if nothing had happened at all. Oh only I sen you idiot. At least knock before you come in. And of course, she yelled at him to play off her previous scene. Subaru, so yeah, this is the prisoner of this mansion. She will be listening to what we say as an advisor in relation to Maybiests. Meili, they're dirty. Oni I san hurt them, sniffle. When Subaru introduced the depressed girl who crouched at the corner of the room being surrounded by stuffed toys, when he introduced Meili, Julius shook his head, who put his finger on his brow. While seeing the girl at the corner of his vision, he says this as if blaming Subaru, who got carried away. Julius, it was a bit clumsy of me to not have gotten more information about this beforehand, but the poorness of your character is showing. If you can't stop this horseplay, then perhaps I'll remain displeased. Subaru, I don't think I'm playing around that much though, or well, I do agree that it was in bad taste. Also, she really was someone dangerous before, you know? Subaru gives an explanation with those words, which makes Julius appear to look doubtful. They ignore those fearful and doubtful men, as Amelia and Anastasia lined up and spoke out to Meili. Amelia, sorry Meili. We'll scold Subaru later for this, so don't worry. Anastasia, my, what a cute girl, isn't she? Beatrice-chan, Petra-chan, isn't this a bit too showing of Natsuki-kun's tastes? Subaru, that's a ridiculous opinion of me. Mind saying something more fitting? I thought to gather people, and not specifically Lolas. There was suddenly some sense of reality in his little girl user nickname, so he wished she didn't say frightening things. Putting that aside, Meili didn't listen to Amelia and her words either, as she was completely angry. In that sense, there was an imbalance in people who had childlike sensitivity. Subaru, Meili. Meili, can't hear you. Subaru, Meili, come on. Meili, I don't care. This was the situation. She was a nuisance who entered I can't hear you mode. Thus, Subaru quickly decided to bring out the last measure. Subaru reaches around his back, and he shows Meili the ace up his sleeve. Subaru, look Meili. It's a present. Take it. It's a new stuffed toy Dare Panda .1. Meili. Wow. It's cute. What Subaru showed to Meili was this stuffed toy that he fixed up on the dragon carriage along the way back from Pristella City. As someone who improved his skills in domestic assistance this past year, Natsuki Subaru's sewing skills became twice as good as before. He could make stuffed toys, and if he wanted to, he could maybe even make clothes for women now. Anyways, the stuffed toy was an innovative work that included a lazy from the heat taste to it for the panda theme. He kind of felt like he had seen something like it before, but that crossed worlds, and it wouldn't be a big deal, so he ignored it. He showed the new work that had this and that to it, and Meili accepted it with eyes that shined. Meili, cute. It's a new animal. Wonder what I should name it. Okay, I've got it. I'll name this one Big Panda. Subaru, I see you've named it what it literally is. Putting aside her naming sense, she was extremely skilled at understanding the essence of things. When she hugged the stuffed panda in a loving way, she looked at Subaru and the others with a face that indicated the renewal of her mood. Meili, by the way, welcome back Oni-san and Wani-san. Looks like you guys came from quite a faraway place, huh? Petra was lonely, you know? Subaru, we were gone for a whole month, after all. And we're going a little far away again, so I don't really want to think about how it'll probably anger Petra, but... Meili, Petra-chan does love Oni-san, after all. Newcomers? Meili was lining up her scattered plush toys onto the shelves, and then suddenly she makes an acknowledging face at Julius and Anastasia. Julius became surprised from that change in her mood, but Anastasia simply gave a nod with a composed look. Anastasia, in comparison to Mimi, it seems like this is just the beginning of what she has to show. Julius, now that you say it, I agree. Let's give our thanks to Mimi. The master and the servant show a weird scene of agreement, and after that, Julius suddenly looks at the room. He looks briefly at that basement room and says, Julius, nevertheless, I had assumed that it would be a harsh environment after hearing that it was a confinement room, but contrary to my expectations, it seems to be a peaceful place to spend time in. Emilia, the person in here is a girl. It's not like they wanted to torment her. But she can't go outside either, so it's complicated. Emilia lowers her eyebrows with a weak look. Just like she said, the confinement room, frankly speaking, the circumstances of Meili's residential room in which she was confined gave off a very lenient feeling. It did seem cold precisely because of the stone pathway, but there were colorful wallpapers and carpet laid out in this girl's room that was at the deepest part of the mansion, so she could do whatever she wanted with how she wasn't even restrained. On the shelves, there were countless stuffed toys handmade by Subaru, along with many books and play equipment. It seemed like she was being given food, and there wasn't any problem with bathing or pooping. In short, it was a place where a hikikomori could live in peace. It was so comfy that even Subaru wanted to be confined in it. However, Subaru, it seems that there is peculiar air similar to a miasma leaking endlessly. Anastasia, that also seems to be that girl's, isn't it? In response to Anastasia and the others' look, Meili nodded with a smile on her face. She had an honest smile, but something came from that girl that was so dreadful and disgusting that it couldn't be hidden. That was the biggest reason Meili was confined here without being released. Subaru, I did talk about it when we were on the dragon carriage, but this girl actually tried to kill people like Emilia and us before, so she's like a professional killer. Guess you could put it like that, right? Julius, I feel that is wrong already at that point, but please continue. Subaru, feels like you're implying something with the way you say that. Anyways, she's a professional killer. So, as for what Meili can do with her small body, in short, it's manipulate mabiasts. She is a mabeast user. Meili, yep, I am very friendly with the bad animals. Meili said that with an ahem as she puffed up with pride, but those details were shocking. Mabiasts were harmful threats to mankind and were never friendly with humans in the first place. It seemed that there was one exception where an arrangement could be made where it'd obey the person who broke the mabeast's horn, but Subaru, in Meili's case, the existence of its horn is irrelevant, although the theory is weak and even if I explain it, you wouldn't understand. Meili, in my mom's words, I have the same role as a mabeast's horn. Sue, I can be friendly with the mabiasts. Fulfilling the role of a mabeast's horn, the meaning of that was obscure. That being said, it seemed like there was never any type of research done on the ecology of mabiasts. Of course, there seemed to be a possibility that there were people who hunted mabiasts for a living, but even if they knew information about their traits, they weren't looking at them from a research point of view. Emilia, at first, Meili attacked us with one more person. Garfield attacked that person, and this girl was caught. Ever since then, this girl has always been sheltered in the mansion. Anastasia, why did they do that much? No matter what you say, if she was an enemy, we should quickly deal with, or not really, since it doesn't seem like this child can be dealt with. Emilia, there's no way we can kill her. But at the same time, we can't banish her either. Because this girl says that if she gets released, Meili, Mom will get mad at me. Elsa died and I failed, so she'll definitely kill me if she finds me. So, staying here is the safest option. Meili answered with a calm tone, but it seemed like she was hiding something in her expression. Meili lost Elsa, who she worked with, and she failed her work. Their guardians were most likely something like professional killer managers, and their failures would definitely never be forgiven. She would be banished and would receive punishment that would certainly be her suffering the consequences, although Subaru and the others had no relation to that. Subaru, it certainly is seeing bad dreams. After all. Julius, this isn't the first time your and Emilia's idea has been brought up. No matter how you look at it, it was absurd for us to say things that were nothing more than nonsense. By the way, who is her mother? Subaru, I don't know. Any other name besides Mom is unknown. Based on what Meili said, we don't even know things like what her face looks like. What kind of family is this? But, considering the professional killer business, perhaps that gloomy way of living couldn't be helped. They guessed what that mother was like based off what Meili said, and it seemed difficult to shake off anxiety about the future. Subaru, that Roswell bastard was also useless after Elsa died, since there was no one like an intermediary. Julius, did you say something? Subaru, just talking to myself. On the first day that Subaru was summoned, the insignia incident was caused by Roswell. Of course, since Elsa tried to kill Emilia on his orders as well, if you considered the flow of events when the request was made, it should have been easy to draw that conclusion. However, the intermediary of that timeline somehow died, and it seemed they were unable to make contact. If you were to believe Roswell's words, Elsa and Meili's attacks after that were not related to his intentions. This was when the mother became a concern. Subaru, anyhow, that's how it is with Meili. This girl is here out of necessity. It's not to spoil her. Meili, considering that, Subaru and everyone are being a little too nice. Subaru, in regards to that, it's the good part of your dreams taking over. Because after all, it was painful seeing this small, youthful girl being confined to the cold basement. It wasn't something you could just decide to forget, and if you tried to disregard it, you'd have bad dreams. So, it's not like he had any grudge against her, and so he was better off being in a good mood with her. Anastasia, wouldn't you normally have a grudge against her? Subaru, should I? Anastasia, I mean, didn't you say that she tried to kill you? If so, then. Subaru, well, I mean, there is spite in doing nothing, although a crime is a crime, regardless of age. In response to Anastasia's question, Subaru goes into thought while scratching his cheek. Once he took a peek at Meili to the side, he saw that she was looking at Subaru with unreadable emotions in her eyes. He wasn't really being concerned about her, but he spoke his thoughts honestly. Subaru, if someone orders a person without judgment to commit a crime, then the person who made the order should be blamed. Even more so if it's a kid. They have a head to think with, but even then, there are still conditions that go with it. It's nothing but a minus to Hammurabi's code, an eye for an eye. Anastasia, that was some lip service. Then do you think the people this girl has killed would understand it like that? Subaru, I don't think so. They are free to want revenge on Meili. As for myself, if I died, even I don't think I'd state my forgiveness like I did now. In the end, Subaru's opinion and thoughts on it were based on how she would meet her. If he was told things like his key point wasn't settled, or that he was being taken over by his emotions, then so be it. Actually, that was it. Subaru, back when I was a kid, I took on responsibilities that I couldn't handle myself for parents and the adults. So, the kids near me, or well, I thought, if the kids who I could become friends with can't take up the responsibilities, how about I take them up instead? That's all. Anastasia, that was a valuable opinion. Thanks. Anastasia rounds off Subaru's words, as she lost interest halfway. Of course, he felt like that was a typical reaction, so his feelings weren't hurt. If his hateful judgment for crime was organized in a way that could be respected, then crime would be judged to be wrong, regardless of age. That was delayed because of the camp's leniency. Subaru didn't dislike that atmosphere and environment. Emilia, Subaru, HM? Emilia, I think what you're saying makes sense. Subaru, thanks. He didn't expect completely positive reactions, but he was saved from those words. And then he changes to Meili, who became neglected even though it was a conversation about her. Subaru matches his eyesight with hers and says, Subaru, I need to talk about how I need your help. Mind coming along with me? Meili, okay. I will come with Oni-san. Subaru made that request, and Meili quietly nodded at him. Subaru did not point out to anyone about how he felt like he saw slight tears come from the girl who hid her face with the panda she embraced. Meili, I've only been to the Ogria sand dunes twice. Subaru and the others' explanation ended, and Meili said those words while playing around with her braided hair. She closes her eyes as if looking back at her memories and says, Meili, I visited to replenish the trump card Maybiests. There were a lot of Maybiests there, so a lot of progress was made, but... Subaru, but? Meili, are you guys really gonna go? Anyone other than me will probably die, you know. It seemed that their actions reflected as reckless in the eyes of this girl, who lacked moral interpretation. The Mabeast leader's opinion carried weight in regards to how biting they were. Subaru, I really want to use your experience as a reference, but your opinion already has a harsh argument with how you say that we'll die if we go, so it's too late for that. Also, if it's just like a desert maze, then we have preparations to break out of it. Anastasia, yes, that is me. Anastasia waves her hand, emphasizing her way of guidance. However, just avoiding getting lost on the path in this conquering of the desert to get to the watchtower gave 30 points. It was a mark inevitable for failure. Or rather, as long as they couldn't find an answer to get a perfect score, they would probably have difficulty getting out alive. The three problems were the sand maze, Mabiest's den, and the sage's eye. The sand maze would work out with Anastasia being Euridna, and as for the counter for the Mabeast den, this is what they wanted to prepare for. That's why he wanted to hear the details from Meili, but... Subaru, how should I put it? Do you not know any way to avoid the Mabiests? Or on the contrary, ways to lure them? Meili, Oni-san, if you run on by yourself, a lot of them will definitely come at you, you know? Subaru, I've already done that a few times, and they were painful experiences. It happened one time a year ago at the mansion, and one time a little after that on the plane by a whale. He felt like it was about time to stop this. Of course, he wasn't reluctant to do it if there was no other measure to take, but he wanted to avoid being the only one left behind in the middle of the desert if possible. Meili, if Oni-san doesn't want to do it, then maybe you could prepare a lot of people for it. Ale of the Mabiests jump at living things over normal food, so maybe something like that. Emilia, that's definitely a no. I'm against it. I am against it. Subaru, you don't have to disagree so frantically like that. Nobody will be chosen, so it's fine. That being said, it seemed like no useful opinions were coming up. Or at least, in relation to the Mabiest's ecology, as long as Meili couldn't come up with an effective plan as someone who was better with them than anyone else was, they were helpless. Subaru, yep, guess we'll have to beat the Mabiests that come at us one by one. Don't expect much from Emilia-tan or Julius. Julius, I want to know your own evaluation, considering how you didn't include yourself there, but are you saying we can do it? Julius reacts to Subaru's proposal by asking Meili about the feasibility of it. Upon hearing that, Meili looks at Emilia and Julius. Meili, probably not. Can Oni-san and the others use magic for about a week without rest? Subaru, you want us to have something like a final fight in a trench. Emilia, I'll try. Subaru, you don't have to. This is the flow of an unreasonable conversation. Emilia-tan's hair and skin will dry up, so let's not. Okay, rejected. It seemed like the plan to break through by force already had some unreasonable details to it. Meili didn't actually know how serious the scene was, but if she wasn't exaggerating it like a kid, then they would never do the unreasonable. Subaru, how about smearing Mabeast blood on the dragon carriage and fooling the other Mabiest's sense of smell? Julius, no, the earth dragon can't fool them, and there's a possibility of them not gathering together like sharks. Something like hiring guards. How about hiring a big army for this like you did with the Hakugi? Subaru, can't do that either. That was done before by the people who challenged the Pleiades watchtower. Even though it wasn't as big as an army, it was still a big group that challenged it. You can guess the result. How about breaking the horn of a powerful Mabeast and using it as an obstacle to other Mabiests? Julius, if it's not as overwhelming as a whale, then we'll be overrun by their numbers. It would be nice if it was simple, and we had something like insect repellent spray to avoid Mabiests. Subaru's odor, or rather, the witch's scent, was a spray that brought insects towards him, so he was useless. Roswell was the one who constantly managed the barrier to function as a separation between the Elam village and the Mabiests. If barriers were created for the people around him, and they each used it to move, it seemed like something like that couldn't be done. Subaru, perhaps we should have Roswell hold on to us, and we can all attack from the sky. Julius, if we could slip by the sage's eye, then that may have been an option. Subaru, damn, right. We have to consider the sage too. His unrealistic viewpoint was denied by a realistic one. Even if they could evade the Mabiests and the desert, there was still the sage to worry about. Just from how nobody was ever able to slip by this person, it was honestly the only thing they didn't know how to handle. Subaru, if we could at least narrow it down to one problem. Meili, geez, I guess I have no choice. Subaru and the others all sat in a circle in the room, getting headaches from thinking about what to do, and then finally Meili said those words like that. She stands and shakes her small head at Subaru and the others, who were sitting, and says, Meili, I can go with you guys. If I'm there, the Mabiests won't care what you do. You'll be free to keep away from them, make them pets, make them kill each other, or make them eat the sage person. Subaru, we want to the second half. Or anyways. He opened his eyes wide at that fairly extreme remark, but that proposal surprised him even more. He was surprised at Meili voicing an opinion he thought she would never say. This meant she was being cooperative, but he was even more surprised about how this meant she was fine with going outside. Subaru, aren't you scared to go outside? Will you be okay? Meili, it's not like I'll be found by Mom right when I leave the mansion, you know? I'm scared of being found, but I can't just stay in here my whole life. He was surprised with Meili being aware of how she had to come out eventually. But that may have been natural. He continued to make time to look at how the girl was doing by turn, but even then, there were far more times when that girl was confined in her room by herself. She surely had so much time to think that the silence would become scary. Being confined in her room by herself was both relaxing and terrifying. And even if those sensations paralyzed her one day, her heart would be tortured suddenly. Emilia, Subaru. And when Subaru felt unusual sympathy for Meili's heart, Emilia gently pulled on his sleeve. Subaru knew what she was thinking, as he agreed with it as well. Subaru, it's not going out for fun. We have a guide, but we'll be crossing the desert. And even though we have you, we have to pass through the beast's den. To make matters worse, the sage might see us too. Meili, isn't it nice taking a walk after a while? Meili says those words to Subaru, continuing to be strong. He didn't know how much of it was a bluff, and how much of it was her telling the truth, but... Emilia, she is the trump card for the maybeists, right? Subaru, yeah that's right. We'll be counting on you, Meili. Meili, I'll try my best either way. Emilia and Subaru look at each other, and then they nod at Meili. The girl who accepted their words says that as if overreaching herself and hugged the panda tightly. And so this became a single step forward towards accomplishing their journey, so Julius folded his arms and said some brief words with a face of admiration as he made sure of the result. Julius, I don't really want to say this, but persuading little girls really is one of your strong points. Although, I don't think it's really a good skill to be known for. Subaru, it's because you guys are steadily treating me like a little girl user. In regards to her being a little girl, I'll have you know that Meili isn't as small as a little girl, okay? Subaru points at the room's entrance in frustration in response to Julius' useless words. Right when he did, the person who showed up on the other side of the door was Beatrice. I was thinking about what was so noisy, only to find out that it was just Subaru making a racket again, I suppose. She finished her private talk with Roswell, joined up with them. It seemed she had another quarrel, but that was put aside as something not worth bringing up, and she sought to cut them off for starters. End of chapters 1 through 3, along their journey.